Okay, I'm going to open the floor now to everyone. We have a few questions that have come in. First questions are for Kate and Alexander. Someone asked, like, what is the language of your podcast, and how, and maybe this person doesn't really know if like how different the Belarusian and the Russian language are. Like, do you guys understand each other? How much? And can you just share that, please?
Yes.
So we're making a, yep, let's go first. Yep, you go.
Just, okay, we have podcast in Russian language because most people in Belarus, in Ukraine, and in Russia, of course, understand Russian words and Russian language. We have some not problems, but it's just um, history things with Belarusian language. Not so many people speaking Belarusian, but we like the language so much and appreciate it. But it's not. We have television, national television, national radio on Russian language, so it's okay. It's not like in Ukraine. In Ukraine, most televisions and radio just regularly have episodes in Ukrainian language. So we don't have it. So we have just Russian. It's like English for European countries when you can was born in Germany or in France, but you know English language. So something like that. Sasha?
Yep, and talking about Belarusian language, the thing is that there are less people speaking Belarusian language than Russian in Belarus. So, yep, this is the thing too. You know, when you run a big questionnaire in Belarus in any year, there will be more people speaking Russian at home than speaking Belarusian at home. We do have a tendency of more Belarusian speaking people here in Belarus. I know it's a, you know, funny thing to say, but yep, we do have like a tendency to grow up a number of those people. But yep, we're Russian language first here. And actually Ukraine is kind of different thing because they speak more of Ukrainian language back at home, and they have like ads saying Ukrainian, and we don't have that thing here. Yep. And just talking about the Russian language thing is that, you know, we can reach more countries doing a Russian language podcast than running a Belarusian language podcast. A simple thing here.
So you both actually mentioned, like all four of you, I mean, mentioned you have Patreons. It's like a thing podcasters do, you know, to sustain yourself. Basically, like selling advertising for a podcast. We've seen like it's like 2021, and it's still not super easy to do and find, you know, to convince someone like, oh, we will get you like a couple of thousands of listeners, and they will tell you, but for that money I can get a couple of, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands on Facebook, and like, you know, what's the difference in the value? So how do you share like your value proposition like through your Patreon? I know you said like you're trying to be better at this, but like obviously you already have some people who are like supporting you. So like in terms of building a community around the podcast, like is there something else you do apart from the podcast? So, you know, a website, newsletter, extra content. How are you thinking about this? Doesn't necessarily have to be like right now, but also like in the future, like where you would like to expand. Maybe Katie, if you can start, and then we can go to Kate and Alexander.
Yeah, sure. So Patreon was something that we came to very late. And I think we had this attitude that was like, we were slightly ashamed to ask listeners for money. It felt like it was this masochistic project where we should just give hours and hours of our time every week for free to give something to people. And in the end, we decided, you know, this is ridiculous. We can't continue like this. And if we are going to continue doing it, we do need money somehow. So we started doing Patreon. And at the beginning, we felt guilty about asking people for money, that we would awkwardly mention it at the end, the very end, after like 30 minutes, like, oh, by the way, maybe you could give us a little tiny bit of money if you can. And, you know, when was it? I think last year we decided we need to just be more honest about this, and we moved up the mention much higher in the show because, you know, people often, for whatever reason, they don't listen to the entire show. Maybe their bus journey has finished, so they don't listen to the 31st minute or whatever. So we moved it up to about sort of 15 minutes into the show, and we saw this huge boost in the people joining. And something that we realized very quickly is that the people who support our show, it's not because they want something. You know, at the beginning, we were very worried about what benefits can we offer them? Can we offer them early shows? Can we offer them ad-free shows? Should we give them merchandise? Should we be making t-shirts? All of these things. And yes, we do offer some of those things. And we try to make it feel like by supporting us, you have like a sort of a bit more of a personal connection with us. One thing that we do that people really, really like is we have a Facebook group where members can talk to each other. And that has become this really super nice community where people share articles, but also things like, you know, during the coronavirus crisis, when Italy was the first country to be affected, lots of people were posting messages of support for our fellow Italian listeners. And it was really very moving to see that. So we've realized it's a community thing, and people do it not because they want something from you, but because they want to support a show that they really like and they want it to exist in the world. And that is not something that we necessarily need to feel guilty about. I would like to develop that community further. We're not really sure how to do it at this point, but it's certainly something that we realize it's something that we have that's very special. We certainly have much more personal relationship with our listeners, even individual listeners, than you might perhaps for a huge show made by a national or international news organization.
Dominic, you being an artist, who was pushing for Patreon more, you or Katie?
Yeah, I don't know. I also have, maybe it's a British thing, I have this like real awkwardness about asking people for money. So I was also reluctant. But yeah, it's really nice in the end.
That's great. I'm actually before the same question goes for Kate and Alexander. From behind the scenes, I'm getting signals that I should mention the Fix has a Patreon. And if you want to support the Fix and everything we do, you can support us, be part of our community, as Katie said. And we don't have anything extra special for now. We will give you more love for it, but yeah, that's definitely something we're going to work on in the future. The link is in the chat. Sorry for stealing this away from you guys. So Kate, Alexander, how are you thinking about this? Like in terms of like, you know, like if maybe your podcast is going to be one day like your main, you know, job.
Really big and grown up, right?
I just want to say one thing quickly, is that I agree with Katie Lee that we also starting to do podcast, and after maybe some months we just start thinking, oh, we should do something like Patreon. How we can earn money from that? Oh, we should do it. And when we start do it, we just think, oh, what we should suggest to that people? T-shirts, pencils, I don't know, maybe sweets, something like that. What we should do?
We should definitely spend more than we earn, of course, on Patreon.
Yes, but after that, we just take care of ourselves. I mean, we just relax and thinking, just starting to think that, okay, we just want to build to very calm and friendly community. It's not about to sell something extra or buy something extra. Just if you want to say us thank you, or just guys, you are cool, okay, we give you $5, $10, and we stop to feeling ourselves like we have to do something extra, like t-shirts or something like that. It's just guys, thank you. And I'm always just asking Sasha, okay, we shouldn't do nothing. Yes, we shouldn't do nothing. It's okay. So it's just mental, I don't know, mental troubles.
So, you know, talking about money in Russian, actually, it's a very stigmatized thing. So we did have a double shame here we haven't finished. So the first one was with Patreon before ads. We understood that we want to try that one out and see if it works in Russian speaking things. Sneak peek, it doesn't work well, as we can say. So actually we were so ashamed of like putting it in the start of podcast, like saying that, guys, we have a Patreon, you can go there, you can donate money, you can subscribe. actually it was like a big shame for us, and it took us like a few episodes and even seasons making ourselves say it in every episode. It actually matters to say it in every episode, as listeners need some time to realize that what they're listening to and they can do this. Yep. So this was the very first shame for us. And the second one was with ads. We realized that in Russian speaking markets, it's still like mostly an advertising market, so we can earn more to make our podcast as sustainable as possible with with money and talking about ads. It was a double shame for us because we were so ashamed to like take money from advertisers and put that into the podcast and to advertise someone, and we're fighting between each other. Can we say that? Can we say that? How many words do we need to say in that ad? How many minutes can we talk about the advertising? And we still do this one. So yeah, though we have a sales manager, it's a big thing for us. Russian thing with money is very strong here, so it doesn't work well for us.
Back to you, Katie. There is a question what do you think is the maximum audience you can reach in Europe with your podcast, or podcasts similar to yours? I'm sure you must have like thought about this, like, oh, if we did a podcast just about politics, we would get millions of listens because it's like everyone is into that at some point. Or maybe if we did a show about culture or something. So like it's two questions actually. If you can say like what's the maximum or is there, right? Really, like if you're doing it in English, maybe it's the whole world, right? And the second question, like, have you ever thought about like we should do a little bit different show?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess if you count the number of people in the European Union, that's what, 400 million people. Some of them are babies. Some of them are really old people who don't have access to the kind of technology that you need. A lot of them don't speak English. If you think about how many people who speak, enough English to listen to a podcast, it's still millions and millions and millions and millions. And of course, we're not meeting many of those. I mean, I think the fact is, and something that we realize, is that not everyone is interested in stuff that's happening outside their national borders, or if they are, maybe they're more interested in American politics or whatever. It's not something that's for everyone. It seems like a very generalist podcast, the fact that we talk about politics and culture in this region called Europe, which is not just the European Union, by the way. We often talk about stuff beyond EU borders, going eastwards. So yeah, I think our audience could certainly be a lot bigger than it is, but we have to some extent acknowledge that EU politics is still seen as something that is a bit geeky. It's a little bit niche, even though we try to speak about it in a very generalist way. Something that really surprised us since we launched is that we have a huge number of Americans listening to our podcast. And we really didn't intend this to be a show for Americans. It's aimed at people who live in Europe. But I think there's two things going on here. One of them is that, the US just has this huge Anglophone podcast market. It's a very developed audience. Like, lots of Americans are more used to listening to podcasts than Europeans are. And the other thing is that a lot of Americans, certainly a lot of our listeners from America, they say to us, we get messages from people saying, thank you so much. I don't hear about European news in the US media. They don't cover this stuff. So to some extent, it's Americans who feel like they want to get this kind of coverage and they cannot get it in the national media. And a lot of it is also people who feel some sort of personal connection with Europe. Maybe it's people who are second generation Ukrainian or Italian or whatever it is. There are a lot of people that feel a connection to this continent. So we've been really surprised. I mean, how much of our audience is it, Dominic? Like almost a third, I think.
Yeah, a third in the US, which also makes it difficult with advertising. Like if you're ever talking to an advertiser, there's no one market that we reach. We're too spread out. But yeah, your other question about whether or not we've ever thought about making a completely different show. Well, we kind of, with this narrative stuff that we're creating, we're now trying to work out how to thread that into the show without completely losing what we've done already and not losing our current audience. But we actually think in a way that could reach a bigger market because everyone loves narrative podcasts. So yeah, we're grappling with that at the moment, and we're trying to find a way to do it.
Might we see maybe a spin-off, like how Serial did from the This American Life, and will be like the story of the Europeans or something like that?
Yeah, it's an option doing a spin-off, but we think we're going to keep it all within the main weekly show. And yeah, I can't mention actually this podcast as a model anymore, but I was going to mention Reply All, but that's yeah, it's not mentionable at the moment because of the scandal. But they did a thing where they started off as this quite firm structure and then gradually built the narrative into their chatty episodes, and we're hoping to go more down that route.
Quick, we're going to wrap up soon. So maybe last quick question from. I'm going to be selfish and I'm going to ask the question which I want to ask. So in terms of like like when you're thinking about like the big issues in podcasting, so it's like monetization. We talked about it, getting new listeners, or like podcast discovery. Could you share like what was for you like what was the best way that you grew your community? You might have like mentioned it a little bit, but just to like wrap up with that, like if someone listening to us is going to start a podcast, like it's 2021, and what would be your advice? Like, okay, like go do this. We didn't do this like soon enough, and it actually helped us a lot. Like what should that person do? We can start actually with Kate and Alexandra, and then end with Katie and Dominic.
No, we too are those people who say that we don't have any advice for you to give. You just need to do stuff on yourself. We have no ideas on here on how anything works in Russian speaking market. So Katy, if you have any advice, you're here.
Yes, I have just one advice that I said at all lections that we have or something like that. It's about journalism, it's about podcasting, it's about any sports and something like that. So the first things you just have an option to try, not to be the best podcasters, not to be the star or something like this. Just try. You can try to make first episode and understand that it's not about you podcasting at all. Maybe it's too hard, maybe it's not so interesting, maybe I don't know, you don't like your voice, something like that. Because in 2029 most people thinking about, okay, I just have 5 minutes or became to a star on Instagram, on podcast platforms and stuff like that, and I should do all things perfectly. It's fucking bullshit. Sorry for my English, because it's really, I hate it, because social media always trying to sell us that all of us experts on mental health, experts on building community, building blah, 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 but it's not true. So you should try, I don't know, all of the things. I don't know, we was boring, we can't just moving, I mean, I don't know, sitting or something like that, and it's really long processes when we start to do it. So just try and understand how you feeling yourself in that case, something like that. So maybe it's a way that helping us, because we were starting that just for, I don't know, just for fun, not like, okay, I'm journalist and I'm content creator, and now we will do just the best podcast in Belarus. No, we was so shy and we can't releasing some the first episode. Just okay, stop it. We should delete it and just, I don't know, it should fire on something burning, something like that. So sorry for my big answer, just so emotional maybe.
No, we like big answers. Katie, Dominic, what would you say to the audience?
What is the question, like about the big problem of growing an audience? Like,
yeah, basically, like if you look back at how you started your podcast, you said it was hard, then you got featured at some lists, and so on. Like if you can like share an advice, like if someone told you back, those few years ago, like this would be the best thing you can do at this moment starting your podcast, like what would it be? Like your future self coming back to your past self and saying like, do this and your life will be easier. In terms of podcasting, of course. I mean, we can get into the the whole life philosophy, but that's maybe for another evening.
Yeah, maybe best with over a beer, I think. I don't know what about you, Dominic, but for me, I think it would be, I It's kind of a boring answer, but don't underestimate the power of traditional media. You know, every time we have been featured in an Italian newspaper or whatever, I mean, like the New York Times recommended us in a newsletter once. These mentions, I mean, like these people just have very developed audiences, and that we've always seen like a big noticeable spike in our audience whenever we get mentioned by one of these established media organizations. And it's very boring because, you know, we think of podcasting as this like revolution that is shaking up the media, but the traditional players still have a lot of power. What do you think, Dominic?
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree with what Kate said, that you kind of just have to be having fun. That's the most important thing. And don't rush it. Don't feel like, oh, I have to have these targets within the next few months. Like, see how long it takes and see how long it stays being fun. Yeah, the only one thing I'd add, like practically, is that getting guests on the podcast who have quite big followings themselves is just a really clever way to build your own audience if they are then willing to share it. It's just one practical tip.
That's super perfect advice. Thank you for everyone.